Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. As you already know, we have asked you in your second assignment to create your personal web page using GitHub Pages. And to do, it's actually expected from you to already be familiar with Git and GitHub and how to use it. However, I found it suitable to have a quick review over GitHub and the basic commands and the basic procedures you're going to be facing and you're going to be using both in this assignment and your upcoming assignments in the future, because from now on we will be requiring you to submit your projects using Git, so you have to get more comfortable using it. In this video we are going to have a quick review of the difference between Git and GitHub, how to create and clone a repository, doing authentication, what a staging area is, the order of fetch, pull, commit, push, and how you can set up your GitHub pages, because some of you had asked me questions on Discord and via email regarding how to submit your assignment. Let's begin with how to create a repository on GitHub. I assume that you are already familiar with this procedure. You have to log into your GitHub account and here click on this plus item. You create a new repository. If this is your personal GitHub account, okay, and since we want to make sure that it's accessible, that the web page itself is accessible using a URL, the name you choose for this repository has to be your id.github.io. Okay, so in this case I have already created the repository. I have used my username, user id.github.io. So I've already created this web page and I want to clone it to work on this remote repository on my own device. The first question that might come up right now is that what is the difference between Git and GitHub? So technically you can have Git installed on your own device in any folder, and it's used to store a history of whatever you've done throughout a project. For instance, as you can see in this image, forget about the remote part here. We're gonna talk about this later. But you can have Git in any folder of your computer, and it technically has three locations, three stages: a working directory, a staging area, and a local repo. So the files you will be working with are stored in the working directory. You tell Git to add it to its list. So Git creates a list of files and begins monitoring the changes that happen in those files. So you move these files to a staging area. You make some changes, you write new code, you add new text, and then you decide to commit those changes, telling Git I have done this so far, so I want you to keep in mind that I have made these changes at this exact moment of time. So Git actually moves your file to the local repo and submits these changes. So over time, you will have a series of commits you have done throughout the time, and you can look back and see on each point of the time what changes you have made and what works have been done. Okay, so this is when you have Git locally on your device. But using GitHub enables you to store the files and the content you're working on a different machine over the internet. Okay, so you technically have another computer in the internet that's storing the code, the files, the text, everything you're working in itself. Okay, so what you need to do is that you work on the files, you move them to the staging area, you tell Git to store these changes locally on your device, and from time to time, you have to synchronize these changes with the remote repository that you have. Okay, so you have your files here using a command called git push. You push your changes to the remote repository so that the other computer on the web, on the internet, has the latest updates you have made, and it stores them regardless of what's happening after that on your own device. And whenever you want to start working on your file, on your project again, you have to check the changes with that remote repository. I'm going to be showing you this procedure with an example. So here I have already created the repository. I have chosen the name. We have a single file here called readme.md. It's a markdown file. So to clone a repository, you come to the repository page, you click on this button here, and to clone it, you have multiple choices here. So here is another step that some of you might face some challenges. If you are not working with the GitHub desktop application and you are using Git using command line interface or the add-on that Visual Studio Code provides you here, I advise you and I highly suggest you to choose this option, cloning the repository using SSH. You can also choose HTTPS, but recent changes in GitHub authentication makes it a bit challenging for you to authenticate your user on your own device, your local device, and then push changes to your remote repository. So I suggest you to use this SSH. I don't want to get too technical about how this item works. However, I need to show you what you need to do to make the SSH cloning work. If you copy this link, you can come here, and I have already created a folder on my device, and I enter this command, git clone, and I paste what I have copied here. So I'm telling Git to clone a remote repository using this address, and it already knows based on the type of the command that it needs to use SSH. When you enter this command, regardless of the device you're using, you might be using a Mac device, a Windows device, or a Linux device, as mine here. So here you are asked to affirm if you want to use this key for connection. For SSH, I'm going to be showing you this SSH connection. So to quickly see how SSH works, look at this image here. Let me just open it for you. SSH is technically a tunnel between your device and another computer over the internet. Okay, to make this tunnel work, you have to exchange keys because it's an encrypted connection. To make this encrypted connection happen, to create the tunnel, actually, you have to exchange keys with your device and the device you're willing to connect to. So you have to create, if you haven't done already, you have to create a new SSH key on your device. GitHub itself has a really good introduction on how to do it based on the type of the device you have. Okay, I already have a key, have a SSH key on my device, stored on my device, so I'm gonna abort this here, and I'm gonna cat SSH. Okay, I think I don't have a key here. I'm gonna copy this command here, and I'm going to create a key. So yeah, I'm gonna store it here. Yes, doesn't have to. Yes, I'm not choosing any passphrase. So the key is created right now. Okay, your key has two parts, a public part and a private part. Just to make sure, don't ever submit your private key anywhere to anyone. It's only private to you. You're the only one who is supposed to have that key, but you can share the public part of your key. So here I'm going to, SSH. So this is my public key, okay? On GitHub, to make the connection happen, you come to the settings to exchange the key that you have just created. You come here, you come to the password and, to SSH and GPG keys. Okay, so here you have to add a new SSH key. Okay, when you click on it, it says you can choose a title for it. I'm gonna say Ubuntu key. So it's an authentication key, and I'm gonna put my key here. Okay. If you are confused about what I have been explaining to you, you can just come to this link here, as it's stated here. I'm gonna post the link in the video description as well, so you can access it. So here there is a very good explanation and introduction on how to add a new SSH key. So here you come to the SSH and GPG keys, you click on the new SSH key, and then you enter your key, your SSH key. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing right now. Okay, so once again, I come here, I copy this link. So I come over here, I say git clone, and I paste it here. So here, my device is asking me, I'm making this SSH connection, and the key that I'm using has this fingerprint. Are you sure you want to use this key to make the connection happen? So here I have to do a double check. I come here to the settings, to the SSH and GPG keys. So I'm gonna check the ID. So here is the fingerprint of the key that I submitted just before. And this is the fingerprint that my device is telling me it's gonna use. And I see that these two are different. So I'm gonna copy this fingerprint and give it to my device. So it's asking, are you sure you want to continue connecting? I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna give you another fingerprint. You're gonna use this. Okay, so here the repository is cloned on my own device. Oops, sorry, let me just go back. So you can do the same procedure using VS Code. Here I'm using a terminal. You can use CS Code. You can just come here and say clone a repository, So we can authorize your repository here using Visual Studio Code, and it takes care of everything for you. Or you can come here, you can open your terminal and say, okay, I wanna, git clone. Okay, since I have already exchanged the keys, my device doesn't ask for a key again here. Okay, so if I list my folders here, I can see that I have this folder here, and I can open it. I can choose open folder. I can go to home. I see the folder here. I open it. Okay, now my project is available on my local device. Okay, I'm gonna trust folder and continue. I trust the authors. Okay, so if you are not working with a GitHub desktop, here in this terminal section, you can always check what's happening inside your folder by using git status command. So git status always tells you if you need to pull new changes, if you have made some changes, anything like that. So let's try something together. I explained the authentication for you, what does commit mean, and what is a remote repository. We're gonna see it as an example. So I'm gonna create a new file here, and I'm gonna call it index.html. Okay, please let us check something together first. If I type my website, my GitHub website URL here, https. Let me see if it opens up. Okay, so here it's showing the content of this readme.md file. Okay, so let's create an index.html file here. I'm gonna check git status. So here I have a change. It's telling me that you have a file here which is not tracked. So I have created index.html and it's not tracked. It means that it's in the working directory right now. So I'm going to add index.html to git. Okay, so now if I type git status, I see that my branch is up to date, and it seems I have changes that needs to be committed. The file is now in the staging area, and there are changes that I have to commit. So I'm gonna add an h1 tag saying this is my personal page, and I'm gonna save it. Okay, so once again, if I do get the status here, it tells me that there are some changes that are not staged on this index.html file. Okay, so I'm gonna add it. I'm gonna commit my changes. So you see here right now it says everything that you've done is in the staging area and you just need to commit it. So I'm gonna commit it, and I'm gonna set a commit message saying added index.html with, okay, I'm just gonna say this. Okay, here it's asking me to tell Git who I am. Okay, so in your project, if you come here and if you check your project description, here we have already told you that you need to set your name and email. So I'm gonna be doing the same thing. Okay, git config, git config dash global user email. It can also be local instead of global. Okay, let's see what happens if I set it to local. Okay, so if I'm going to git commit, okay, now I have committed my changes. If I enter git status command, it says your branch is ahead of origin main by 1 commit. So here, what Git is telling me is that, do you remember we had a remote repository that was storing the latest version of your code? Okay, so it's saying that on your local repo, you have made commits that are ahead of this remote branch. This means something has changed here, and it's not been synchronized with the remote branch here. It means that here I have 2 files in my repository, while on my remote repository I still have only 1 file being readme.md. So if I push my changes, and as we can see, our branch is up to date with origin main, my changes are pushed to the remote repository, and we have the index.html file added here. And if we check the content of this file, we see that header is existing here. So I'm interested to see what happens if we refresh this page. It's still showing the readme.md file. Okay, so always remember to have this order in mind: fetch, pull, commit, push. Okay, so we saw what committing means, and we realized what a remote repository is. The next thing I want you to know is this order of fetch, pull, commit, and push. So anytime that you want to work on a project on your local device, make sure that you first receive and retrieve the latest changes. Okay, and that's because, let's say here I'm gonna make some change on this file, and it's an example of when you are working on a project with other people, and they might also be making some changes on the project, and you might not know it. So you need to fetch and retrieve the latest changes on your device before you start making changes on it on yourself. So here I'm gonna say, on this website I'm going to talk about the projects I have done. Okay, and I'm gonna set it as a p tag instead of an h2. So I'm gonna commit changes. Okay, so right now my remote repository has a change that my local repository on my device isn't aware of. So if I type git status here, it says we are on main branch, our branch is up to date with origin.main. Okay, so to retrieve changes, we have 2 different commands. One is git fetch, and the other is git pull. Let's see what the difference is. I'm gonna type git pull. Okay, here we can see that this file has changed. So we've had 2 insertions, 1 deletion. So everything has, we have retrieved the changes, and those changes have been applied to the corresponding files on my device. Okay, so if I type git status, it again says my branch is up to date with origin.main. So let's try this out. I want to show you the difference between git pull and git fetch. Let's make another change here. I'm gonna href equals to I get all of the information from this website. Okay, so here what we see, okay, so here our local repository is aware that some changes have been done on the remote repository, okay? But it hasn't updated the files, okay? So if I click here, it says we have some changes, okay? You see, here it says your branch is behind from origin main, and it can be fast forwarded. If we want to apply the changes, we have to say git pull. Okay, and when we do it, we should be able to see the changes here. Status. Okay, what's happening here? Okay, yeah, so here it's showing us the change here. Okay, so this is another thing that I wanted to show you. Lastly, you can choose to have this page, this web page, as I have here, either on your personal GitHub account or on your SFU GitHub account. So I've already shown you how to do it using your personal GitHub. If you're using your SFU GitHub account, okay, you might not be able to create a page using this address. However, you can choose to create a web page based on a repository, based on each repository. To do, you just have to go to the settings and come here to the pages section, and you actually, I have already done it, but on this page you choose to deploy a GitHub page based on the changes you make on the root branch of your repository. Okay, so right now if I click on this link, or if I open this link, you can see what we have here, which is an example I created for IAT 235 in the winter semester. These are the basic commands that you have to know about Git, and it was a quick review on what you need to know about Git. If you haven't already published your project on your GitHub account, make sure to do it before tomorrow night. And if you have any questions, we will be available to answer you. Take care.